Hey everybody, it's Tracy Brown from Intentional Inclusion and Stained Glass Spirit. And I am so delighted to hang out with you and continue this series, The Secret Fears of LGBTQ plus champions, those folks who volunteer to staff your events, the people who speak up and sponsor events, the people who speak up and interrupt when inappropriate comments are being made about people or issues connected to the LGBTQ plus spectrum. And so in preparing for Pride Month, I really wanted to do something a little different than just highlight history makers or focus on some of the problems and issues, and decided as a result of conversations with a number of people to really talk about this topic. Like sometimes people will say we don't have enough allies, or how do I get people to be an ally? And there seems to be some confusion about that. And I don't like to think of it as allies. Some of you know that I rarely use the term ally because I think that those of us who are doing the work are not doing it to be an ally to people who are negatively affected. We're doing it and we're motivated by wanting to be a champion for the kind of world we want to live in. So while I am humbled and I am grateful when people call me an ally or refer to me as an ally to the LGBTQ plus community, I personally lean into, I'm a champion for the LGBTQ plus community because I'm a champion for there to be equality and respect for everyone in the world. But enough about that. Let's dive into the focus. So, part one focused on what contributes to the fear and the reluctance and the hesitancy that some people feel about becoming or becoming known as a champion for the LGBTQ plus community. And so if you missed that, please, just go to the playlist and check it out. Because today we're going to focus on um, having and approaching people who are potential champions with more comfort, and really with more comfort, but also with more confidence. And so I'm going to be focusing on what are some things for you to keep in mind as you are developing your strategy for recruiting or for asking and inviting people to be champions for LGBTQ plus inclusion? So this is a true story, and I find it really interesting. I had been interviewing people and asking them about why they were hesitant to be known as a champion. But I also had some conversations with people who were leaders in employee resource groups. I had some conversations with people who were actively engaged in community organizations that were providing resources and programs and activities for the LGBTQ plus community in several cities. And one of the questions that I found myself asking was in response to the feedback I was getting from so many people. I was hearing from so many people that they wanted to acquire more allies or champions. And they were feeling like we just can't get people to volunteer, or we do events, but nobody is signing up to help us like pull it off. And um, some people, a number of people said, what we need more people behind the scenes to work on all of the things that are required or necessary, or we need more people to market us, and so we need more visibility, and that's why we want to recruit allies, and that's why we need more champions. And the question I intuitively kept asking them was, to me, a really obvious question. Well, who have you asked? If these are the challenges that you're facing, who have you asked? And to me, that was like a no-brainer question. But people were fumbling over their responses. Well, I asked my friends, or I asked the person who already knows me personally, or I ask sometimes I ask people when they come to our events, and I make an announcement. So I don't ask them individually, but we make an announcement and say we're happy to have more volunteers. And if you're interested, sign up here or send an email there. And I was like, well, why aren't you going up to people and asking them directly? Or what campaigns have you done in your organization or in your community that specifically say we're recruiting for people to assist with X, Y, and Z? And I was getting all kinds of answers, which sounded mostly like excuses to me. Well, we don't want to just ask or send out an announcement to the whole organization because we want people who are interested in this topic and who are already attending our program. So we just ask at events or let people know that they can volunteer. Or I don't ask people individually because I just don't want to put anybody on the spot. Like, what if they want to say no, but I don't want to embarrass them. And so I don't ask people, one-on-one, unless it's somebody I already know, right? Three, what if they say no? Then what do I say? Like, oh, I'm sorry. Like, did I offend you? Well, they could be saying no for 1,000 different reasons. It may have nothing to do with being offended. It may be that they're overloaded, or it may be that they don't understand what you really would expect them to do, or right, or so that what if they say no? What if you invited somebody to go to lunch with you and they said no? Right? Why does it have to be more? Why do you have more investment in being embarrassed or ashamed, or tongue tied if someone were to say no? Number four, well, if someone's interested in volunteering or in being involved with us, they'll sign up, right? They'll find us, or they'll sign up on their own. And then number five came up way more than I expected. Well, it's volunteer work, and that's asking a lot of people to volunteer their time. If we could pay them, I'd feel more confident about going out and asking them. And that was true both in the community and in organizations that have ERGs. All five of these came up over and over and over again. So I'm going to share with you some ideas for success, some ideas that you can keep in mind as you are thinking about what you might say to individuals as you approach them, or how you might plan to actually approach or nurture or develop relationships with groups of people or categories of people that could result in you increasing the number of champions for LGBTQ plus programming and issues in education. But before I do that, I just have a question for you, and I'm going to invite you to reflect for 30 seconds on what are some of the things you have done in the past to invite people to become LGBTQ plus champions in your community or organization? What are some of the things you have done in the past to encourage people to become champions in your community or in your organization? And I want you to be thinking about that because I'm curious how many of those things are very concrete and direct asks, and how many of those are programmatic or more subtle things, but you know they help you actually increase the ranks of your allies or champions. Hopefully, some of the things I mentioned you are already doing. And you will be able to say, oh, good, that's already on my list. But also, I'm hoping that some of the things I mentioned are not already on your list, and you can add them to the list that you just began. So, number one that you can do is to educate me as a potential ally or champion. Educate me about the role I can play or the impact I might have. Often, because you're already involved, you don't realize that I don't even really know why it makes a difference. I mean, I may care about being inclusive, but I don't know how volunteering or how being on a committee or helping with an event will really make a positive difference in our organization. And so you will be smart to give me some ideas of specific tasks or specific roles, and what's the impact if I get involved? What difference does it make? I may be thinking you already have a lot of volunteers and you don't need me. I mean, I attended 3 events and everything went so smoothly. I would never think that they needed me too. So educate me as you are inviting me, whether it's a one-on-one ask or whether it is a more formal process or marketing campaign. Educate me about the role I can play. Number two, assign me a specific buddy. Assign me someone who I can attend with or partner with, or if I sign up to work on a seminar series that you're creating, that the two of us are doing it together. And this really addresses some of the fears and hesitancies that people have, because they're not sure if they're going to be, especially if they are cisgender or straight, they sometimes have concerns about, will I be the only one? And whether my buddy is a part of the LGBTQ plus spectrum or not, it's like, oh, well, this person and we're working on this together. Or I have someone I can lean into, or someone who knows me or is getting to know me. So I don't feel like as a champion, I am doing it all by myself. And if something comes up and I'm a little uncomfortable or a question gets asked and I don't know the answer, I have a built-in buddy system of someone who I'm used to working with and building a relationship with, and I can go to them or lean on them a little bit. So often what happens is we leave our allies and our champions, we assume because they raise their hand that they know exactly what to do. And often that's not the case, and they're feeling really uncomfortable or unsteady. Number three, introduce me to other champions and known allies. So whether I have a buddy or not, because these ideas for success are not like you must do all of them. So think about in your organization what will work. So introduce me to other champions and other people who are known as allies. So I might be in the LGBTQ plus spectrum. I may identify, but still, I may not want to be very visible in that role. But when you start introducing me to others who are champions and allies, then I begin to see more and more. There are all kinds of people who are stepping up to the plate, who are speaking up, who are standing up, and who are supporting your inclusion efforts. Related to this, but not the exact same, is encourage those who are champions and allies to publicly identify themselves. So I can think of a personal example where I was participating in a conference, and the affinity group for LGBTQ plus members had rainbow stickers that they were wearing and they were passing out. And I asked for one, and the person I asked at first was a little surprised because they knew that I was cisgender, and they didn't expect me to request a sticker. And it was like, no, I want to wear a sticker because I want people who are shy or part of the community but don't want to be out, that they know I'm someone they're safe to talk to or they're safe to be themselves around. And um and that was a really interesting thing because I was not at all concerned about whether people thought I was a lesbian or not, or bisexual or not, or transgender or not, or right. That never crossed my mind because I know who I am and I'm comfortable with who I am. And it began this whole conversation about how is it that I am willing to publicly identify myself as someone who is a champion for this group of people that some people say I'm not a part of. Well, I think I'm a part of every group of people, right? In under the umbrella of humanity in some way. We are all connected. And so um, encourage others and give opportunities to people who are already serving as champions, regardless of how they self identify, so that they can speak up or they can be featured in your marketing or they can be speakers at events or they can do introductions. And when they're introducing themselves, to say, I am a champion for the LGBTQ plus members of our community. So I've got three more. Collaborate. So collaborate with other ERGs or other affinity groups. So one of the things that who I could tell a whole long story about this. I've talked about it a few other times in other programs about the company, the client organization I was working with, and we were restructuring their affinity groups. And one of the things I suggested they build in was that in the funding that the organization was willing to provide to support programs and activities, that they earmark a certain percentage of funding that could only be accessed if two or more ERGs collaborated on a community-based project. And that turned out to be so successful because the members of those two different affinity groups got to know each other because they were working on something in the community, and they both the both groups also got more visibility in different communities because they were working together. The long-term impact of that became that employees from one affinity group began to attend events sponsored by the other throughout the year, not just the one program that they collaborated on, and vice versa. And so they developed relationships, and both groups got champions and allies from the other group who never before had been involved in or attended even one event of the other groups, programs, and activities. So when you collaborate with other ERGs or other affinity groups in your community, what you're really doing is you are also marketing and you are also building relationships that develop into champions. Number 6, highlight senior leaders who are champions. So if you're in an organization, anyone in the C-suite or anyone at the vice president level or director level and above, depending on your organization, really highlight them in a role. Do a little 5-minute podcast or a Zoom interview that gets recorded and distributed about why they are champions and how they feel being a champion supports the goals and the values of the organization. If you are a leader in the community, you could do that same thing with the city manager or the police chief or the school board president, people who are leaders community-wide who can speak to the importance of LGBTQ plus inclusion. And the last idea for success that I have for you today is to feature the business impact that your programs and activities are having. And do this in a big way, at least once per year. So often, people who could be great champions think that the reason you have an ERG is just for social networking, and they don't realize that you might actually be influencing the marketing of the business or the organization, or that you are providing a specific kind of support to certain customers or patients. And so the business impact or how you are contributing to the mission of the organization or the community being achieved is critical for some people to say, oh, I didn't know they were doing that. Oh yeah, I'd want to support that, or I'd want to get involved there. So these are just 7 ideas for you to think about in terms of how you can have more champions and how you can recruit more people to be champions and how you can encourage people to be actively engaged in what you are doing. But I want to go back to a very basic. This is so basic. I almost always forget to say it, and that's this. So often we don't ask people because we think we're asking someone to do us a personal favor. Like, oh, I'm part of the LGBTQ plus affinity group and we're having this event and we really need somebody, and I know you and you know me and we like each other, and would you come and be a part of this? That's like, do me a personal favor. And sometimes I have had to resort to that for lots of things, lots of programs, lots of events. So it's not wrong, but it's not the primary thing you want to focus on. What you want to focus on if you want to build long-term success is, number 1, you've got to address what fears or concerns I might have as a potential ally or champion. And you are going to feel more comfortable asking and inviting me and others if you are able to weave in what's the business outcome. How can you develop certain skills? If you are wanting to move up in the organization, come volunteer with us because you could be on the leadership team and develop leadership skills that then you can apply in your primary job. are, we're all a part of this same organization or this same community, and we value inclusion. Here are three ways that you can demonstrate that you value inclusion by working with us on this committee or this advisory group or this event. And the cultural impact. We are building an environment and a culture that represents inclusion. And here are two ways that you could do that by working with us. So when you are doing that, you get more comfortable because you're not just relying on them to like you or respond to you. You are making the ask in the context of the organization and in terms of mutual benefit. They're not just helping you, they are helping to grow the organization or demonstrate the values and the culture of the organization. So I'm hoping that these 7 ideas for success and a few other comments are helping you think through how you can increase your own comfort when approaching potential champions. This is number 2 of a 4-part series on the secret fears of LGBTQ champions. And you can look for the next episode next Wednesday, or you can look in the description for the link to the playlist where every week we will add an episode. And if you miss one, you can find it there. Week 3, our episode number 3, will focus on ideas for nurturing relationships with the existing champions and allies you already have. And in week 4, we'll focus on trust, transformation, and long-term success. This is the secret fears of LGBTQ plus champions. My name is Tracy Brown. You can find more information at achievingInclusion.com, not only related to this series, but other seminars, webinars, and summits that we have done in the past. See you next time.